Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The courtroom was bathed in harsh light, reflecting the tense faces of those present. Judge Richard Whitman, known for his arrogance and swift judgments, stared around the room with a mixture of superiority and impatience. Today, he was to decide a seemingly trivial case, a parking ticket issued to a black woman named Olivia Carter. Whitman, already irritated by what he considered a needless disruption to his schedule, didn't even bother to listen attentively to the defense. His cold, prejudiced gaze lingered on Olivia, noting with obvious condescension her impeccable attire and confident posture. A simple fine, nothing more, he muttered to himself, satisfied with his impending judgment. As he struck his gavel to formalize the sentence, Olivia calmly raised her eyes and spoke in a clear and composed voice. "Your Honor, I believe you don't know exactly who I am." Whitman frowned, intrigued and slightly annoyed. Olivia then pulled a business card from her pocket. "I'm Olivia Carter, Chief District Attorney." Silence fell over the courtroom. The murmurs of the audience turned to shocked whispers. Whitman's face went livid. In an instant, the power and condescension he thought he wielded crumbled. He had just condemned one of the most influential figures in the judicial system, without knowing it. Olivia rose with dignity, her gaze burning with calm and authority. "Perhaps it would be appropriate for this fine to be cancelled and for you to re-evaluate your judgments, Your Honor." Whitman, unable to utter a word, felt his arrogance melt away, replaced by a stark realization of his error. One thing was certain, this lesson in life and justice would be etched in his memory forever. The morning was gray and heavy over the city of Newport, and the courtroom was already filled with impatient murmurs. The Judge Richard Whitman, a man in his 50s, sat on his platform, his stern face framed by his graying hair. He adjusted his black robe with a mechanical gesture, ready to begin his day of quick decisions. The file she was given that day seemed ordinary, a parking ticket. The defendant, Olivia Carter, she was an elegant woman in her 40s, dressed in a simple but impeccable suit. Her dark, piercing eyes fixed on the judge with a quiet confidence that contrasted sharply with the tense atmosphere in the room. Whitman quickly scanned the file, his mind already on the upcoming trial. He noted the defendant's name with a touch of condescension. "Another one who's going to contest a simple parking ticket," he thought. His voice, cold and authoritative, echoed through the courtroom. "Ms. Carter, you are here to contest your fine. What do you have to say in your defense?" Olivia stood up calmly, her posture straight and her tone confident. "Your Honor, I am not contesting the fact that I parked, but the manner in which this fine was issued." Whitman, impatient, nodded his head disdainfully. He didn't bother to listen to the details, already assuming it was a waste of time. He raised his gavel and declared, "I stand by the fine. $150, to be paid within 30 days. Olivia remained silent for a few seconds, her gaze fixed on the judge. Then she slowly took a business card out of her bag and calmly handed it over. "Your Honor, I believe you don't know exactly who I am. I am Olivia Carter, the district attorney." A shocked murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Whitman's face paled instantly, his hands trembling slightly. In an instant, the arrogance and superiority he thought he possessed melted away like snow in the sun. He had just condemned one of the most powerful figures in the judicial system, without even knowing it. Olivia sat up straight, her gaze piercing but calm, and said, "Perhaps it would be appropriate for this fine to be waived, and for you to reflect on your judgments in the future, Your Honor." Whitman, unable to respond, simply stared at the prosecutor. This silent confrontation marked the beginning of a lesson he would never forget. After the incident in the courtroom, the Judge Richard Whitman he left his office in silence, his face marked by confusion and humiliation. For the first time in years, he felt a mixture of fear and anger, fear of the real power of the one he had despised, and anger at himself for his negligence. In the corridor, his assistants watched him anxiously. Whitman, usually self-assured, walked past them without a word, his jaw clenched. One of them, Tom Reynolds, dared to whisper, "Your Honor, that was the chief prosecutor." Whitman didn't reply. He knew that this single detail could ruin his reputation if rumors got involved. Every step down the corridor reminded him of the gravity of his mistake. How could he have judged someone without verifying their identity? And worse still, why had his prejudices blinded him? During this time, Olivia Carter she returned to her office calmly and with dignity. Everyone she passed sensed the quiet strength emanating from her. She hadn't sought to humiliate the judge, but her natural authority commanded respect. Her colleagues whispered among themselves. "Did you see what happened?" The judge was completely thrown off balance. Back in his office, Whitman began to review his recent decisions. His mind, tormented, kept returning to that confrontation, the murmurs in the room, Olivia's calm but penetrating gaze, and the business card she had confidently brandished. He felt a searing shame. This mistake could jeopardize his career, but more than that, it had exposed the latent bias that guided his judgments. Whitman knew he had to act. He couldn't let this go unnoticed. But the question was, how could he rectify his mistake without appearing weak in front of his colleagues and the public? His habitual arrogance prevented him from seeking advice, and his pride drove him to consider dangerous solutions to restore his authority. Meanwhile, Olivia was working on new cases, indifferent to the judge's torment. But in her mind, she knew that the lesson she had just delivered was not only for Whitman, but for any system where power and prejudice were too easily intertwined. The thunderbolt had just fallen, and from now on, no one in the courthouse could ignore that justice could be called into question by competence and dignity. In the following days, the courthouse of Newport seemed different to the Judge Richard Whitman where he once reigned supreme. Every step in the corridors reminded him of his public humiliation. The murmurs of colleagues and lawyers echoed in his ears like constant whispers, the judge who had dared to convict the chief prosecutor without even verifying her identity. Whitman attempted to regain his usual authority during a hearing for a minor civil case. But as soon as he mentioned his name, several lawyers exchanged knowing glances, and a stifled laugh was heard from the back of the room. One of the assistants whispered in his ear, "Your Honor, everyone is talking about the Olivia Carter case." This remark stirred anger and anxiety in Whitman's heart. He was aware that his reputation as an impartial and competent judge was now tarnished. Even the local media had covered the incident, highlighting the judge's clumsiness and implicit bias. Headlines like, "Judge Whitman humiliated by the chief prosecutor," circulated on social media, amplifying her shame. During this time, Olivia Carter she received discreet but numerous congratulations from her colleagues and the judicial staff. She had demonstrated that competence and respect could impose authority more effectively than arrogance and prejudice. But she remained cautious. She knew Whitman was a powerful man and that he might seek revenge. Whitman, alone in his office, looked at himself in the mirror. His reflection showed him a man both humiliated and furious. For the first time, he began to question his methods and prejudices. The anger he felt was no longer directed solely at Olivia, but also at himself. He had underestimated the power of integrity and competence, believing he could judge and condemn with impunity. The judge knew the situation could worsen. Olivia was now aware of her mistake and her bias. She had the power to escalate the incident statewide, and Whitman no longer had any control over public perception. The only remaining question was, would he humbly accept his actions, or let pride consume him and ruin his career? In the corridors, the murmur of colleagues and the respectful silence of the lawyers served as a constant reminder, power without discernment inevitably leads to downfall. The Judge Richard Whitman he felt the pressure mounting at each hearing. His attempt to regain authority always ended in visible discomfort. The lawyers now regarded him with a cautious mixture of suspicion. Even his longtime colleagues seemed to observe him differently, aware of his past humiliation. One morning, Whitman called a discreet meeting with his aides to discuss strategies. He wanted to show that he had not been affected by the incident with Olivia Carter. Tom Reynolds, faithful but worried, he tried to advise him. "Your Honor, perhaps it would be better to let the matter drop and demonstrate your professionalism on future cases, rather than forcing the issue." But Whitman, overcome by his pride, rejected this idea. "I must restore my authority. If I let this go, everyone will think I am weak." At the next hearing, Whitman took on a case involving a real estate dispute, where Olivia Carter represented the district as prosecutor. Whitman attempted to revert to his usual cold and authoritative tone, but Olivia responded calmly and precisely, pointing out each legal error with unflinching clarity. Every objection from Whitman was easily countered, and the hearing became a veritable battleground of skills. The murmurs in the courtroom turned into admiring whispers directed at Olivia, while Whitman began to lose his composure, unable to conceal his irritation. At the end of the session, Olivia addressed him in a calm but firm tone. "Your Honor, we must always ensure that our judgments are based on facts and not on personal impressions." Whitman, humiliated but forced to remain impassive in the room, understood that his attempt to reassert authority had failed. For the first time, he realized that his arrogance and prejudices were weaknesses that his peers and the prosecutor had now identified. As he left the room, he promised himself to seriously reflect on his conduct and behavior, but his pride, although shaken, still drove him to seek a way to turn the situation around without publicly admitting defeat. Outside, Olivia returned to her office, aware that she had just won a silent but powerful victory. She knew that the real lesson was not simply to correct a mistake, but to show that competence, dignity, and impartiality could triumph over arrogance and prejudice. The scandal surrounding the Judge Richard Whitman it soon spilled beyond the walls of the courthouse. Local media quickly picked up the story, Olivia Carter highlighting the judge's humiliation and his hasty, prejudiced judgment. The headlines echoed the public's silent anger. Judge Whitman mistakenly convicts the chief prosecutor, and, when arrogance meets competence. Whitman felt the pressure mounting. Colleagues who once respected him were now cautious, even suspicious. Even outside lawyers, brought in for minor matters, subtly challenged him. Every hearing became an ordeal where his reputation was questioned before he even uttered a word. During this time, Olivia Carter discreetly received messages of support from colleagues and lawyers. "Your lesson is memorable, finally, someone puts that arrogant judge in his place." But she never let the glory go to her head. For her, the victory was professional and symbolic. She had just shown that no power was above integrity. Whitman, isolated in his office, consulted his schedule and realized that the upcoming cases would expose his past mistakes. A formal complaint of discriminatory treatment had been filed against him, and the State Judicial Committee had opened an investigation. The man who thought himself untouchable now found himself vulnerable, and every decision he made could be analyzed and criticized. Despite his pride, Whitman began to understand that he needed to change his way of judging and behaving. But pride remained stubborn, and he still hesitated to openly admit his mistakes. His nights were now haunted by the image of Olivia, calm and imposing, as he silently crumbled under the weight of his own error. Meanwhile, Olivia continued her work, demonstrating through her professionalism that true authority lies not in the power of a title, but in competence, dignity, and respect for others. Her quiet victories strengthened her influence and reminded everyone that the justice system could and should be fair, impartial, and vigilant against prejudice. Whitman was beginning to understand that the fall of an arrogant man can be swift, but that redemption requires sincere self-awareness and profound change. A few weeks after the incident, the Judge Richard Whitman was summoned to a special hearing before the State Judicial Committee. The case, his conduct in the Olivia Carter case, and the complaints of bias and abuse of power. Whitman knew this was the pivotal moment in his career and that his pride might be his undoing once and for all. In the courtroom, Olivia Carter was there, seated with a calm but imposing posture. Everyone present felt the weight of her presence. Whitman, despite his experience, felt intimidated by her gaze, which combined authority, intelligence, and firmness. When the committee chairman invited him to speak, Whitman began with a hesitant speech, attempting to explain his actions as a simple misunderstanding. But Olivia intervened with unwavering clarity. "Your Honor, this is not a misunderstanding. This is a hasty judgment based on prejudice. In our judicial system, no power should prevail over justice and fairness." Whitman felt each word penetrate like a mirror to his own conscience. He wanted to retaliate, to make excuses, but he realized that this would only worsen his situation. For the first time, he confronted the truth: his arrogance and biases had compromised not only his credibility, but also the image of the institution he represented. After a heavy silence, Whitman took a deep breath and spoke with unusual honesty. "I acknowledge my mistakes. My judgment was influenced by personal impressions and not by the facts. I deeply regret this conduct and I am ready to accept the necessary disciplinary measures." The room fell silent, then a murmur of approval arose. Olivia nodded slightly, satisfied but remaining professional. She knew this public recognition was a crucial step toward true justice. This admission marked a turning point. Whitman understood that power does not reside in imposed authority or the fear one inspires, but in respect, competence, and the ability to admit one's mistakes. It was a painful but ultimately liberating moment for him. At the end of the hearing, Olivia left the room with the dignity and serenity that had always characterized her. Whitman, for his part, remained seated, meditating on the lesson he had just learned. Humiliation may be swift, but redemption requires courage and sincerity. After the hearing before the Judicial Committee, the Judge Richard Whitman he returned to his office with a mixture of relief and unease. Publicly admitting his mistakes had been a necessary step, but he knew it was only the beginning of a long process to regain lost trust. In the days that followed, each hearing became a test of Whitman's new approach. He began to listen attentively to the lawyers, ask precise questions, and treat each defendant impartially, regardless of their appearance or status. His colleagues, initially surprised, slowly began to notice the change. One morning, he was faced with a delicate case. A young black lawyer, Marcus Johnson, he was challenging an unjust administrative decision. Whitman, aware of his past biases, took the time to examine every detail, weigh the facts, and ask pertinent questions. His judgment was fair and balanced, finally reflecting the competence and equity he always claimed to represent. During this time, Olivia Carter she observed Whitman's progress from afar. She didn't intervene directly, but she knew how to recognize sincere efforts. During a chance encounter in the courthouse, she gave him a measured smile. "You seem to be taking your responsibilities more seriously. Keep it up, Your Honor." Whitman, touched by this simple comment, understood that Olivia's recognition was not a reward, but an encouragement to persevere on the path of humility and true justice. He realized that his power finally had real meaning when it served fairness and not his ego. The first steps toward redemption were often clumsy and fraught with doubt, but Whitman began to feel that his actions could now inspire trust rather than fear. Respect gradually replaced fear, and he began to understand that a true judge earns esteem not through arrogance, but through justice and integrity. In the corridors of the courthouse, the murmurs began to change in tone. Colleagues now approached him, speaking cautiously but without contempt. The road to redemption was still long, but Whitman felt, for the first time in a long time, that he was walking in the right direction. A few months after his initial realization, the Judge Richard Whitman was faced with a sensitive case that would test his transformation. The case involved an accusation of corruption implicating an influential member of the local community. The media were closely following the case, and any misstep could immediately destroy Whitman's credibility. During the hearing, the chief prosecutor Olivia Carter represented the state with its usual authority. She presented the evidence clearly and methodically, emphasizing the importance of fairness and transparency. Whitman, this time, listened attentively to every argument, asking precise but respectful questions, without prejudice or arrogance. During the hearing, the defendant attempted to manipulate the situation by exploiting Whitman's recent past. He made insinuations about the judge's previous mistakes, hoping to sow doubt and gain an advantage. Many would have succumbed to pressure, but Whitman remained steadfast and impartial. He calmly declared, "Past mistakes should not determine our present actions. Every case must be judged on the facts and evidence, not on anyone's reputation or history." The courtroom was struck by the firmness and fairness of his statement. Murmurs of admiration arose among the lawyers and the public, while Olivia Carter, although she was the opposing party in this case, gave him an approving look. At the end of the hearing, Whitman delivered an impartial, balanced, and fair judgment. He knew this decision wouldn't fully undo the damage of his past, but it clearly demonstrated that he had grown. For the first time, he felt a mixture of respect and genuine pride, respect for the principles of justice he now served, and pride in having overcome his pride and prejudices. It was a subtle but crucial victory. Whitman understood that a judge's true power lies not in the fear he inspires, but in the ability to deliver justice fairly, even under pressure. He had just reached a turning point. His transformation was no longer theoretical, but tangible and verifiable. In the following months, the Judge Richard Whitman he worked tirelessly to restore his credibility and regain the trust of his colleagues and the public. Each hearing became an exercise in impartial justice, and he took care to verify every detail before delivering a verdict. His past mistakes remained a constant reminder of the fragility of reputation and the importance of humility. Olivia Cartera's chief prosecutor, she discreetly monitored its progress. She never interfered in an intrusive manner, but she ensured that the principles of justice were upheld. Her professional demeanor and natural authority continued to serve as a silent model for Whitman and the entire courthouse. One day, a particularly delicate case landed on Whitman's desk, a lawsuit involving an influential family accused of abuse of power. The witnesses were nervous, the lawyers tense, and the media pressure intense. Whitman, aware of the significance of this case, adopted a methodical and impartial approach. He listened to every testimony, asked precise questions, and displayed a patience his colleagues had never seen in him. When the verdict was delivered, the courtroom was struck by the fairness and clarity of its decision. Even the initially disagreed parties showed respect. Murmurs of admiration could be heard, and Whitman felt that his transformation was beginning to have tangible effects. Olivia, who was there to oversee the district's case, approached Whitman at the end of the hearing. She calmly told him, "You have demonstrated fairness and professionalism. This is how justice is restored. Continue in this direction, and you will inspire those around you." Whitman, moved but discreet, understood that his redemption was not only personal, but also institutional. By acknowledging his mistakes and changing his practices, he was helping to restore public confidence in the justice system. The respect he was beginning to receive no longer stemmed from imposed authority, but from the credibility he had built with consistency and integrity. The lesson Olivia had silently instilled in him months earlier was now bearing fruit. True justice demands courage, humility, and vigilance. A year had passed since the incident that had humiliated the judge. Richard Whitman. Gradually, he had transformed his behavior, moving from arrogance and prejudice to listening, fairness, and thoughtfulness. The murmurs of suspicion in the courthouse had turned into signs of genuine respect. One morning, Whitman was assigned a case of national importance, a trial involving ethical violations in a public department, closely followed by the media. The pressure was immense, but this time, Whitman approached the case calmly and impartially. He carefully reviewed the files, listened to every testimony, and questioned the witnesses without letting his personal opinions interfere. Olivia Carter, present to oversee the prosecution on behalf of the district, she observed every move with her sharp but professional gaze. She knew this case would be the ultimate test of the judge's transformation. When the verdict was delivered, Whitman spoke clearly, fairly, and with balance. The decision reflected a judgment based on facts and evidence, not impressions or prejudices. The courtroom applauded quietly, and the media covered the event, highlighting Whitman's renewed commitment to judicial integrity. After the hearing, Olivia approached him and said with a slight smile, "You have learned to turn your mistakes into strengths. That is how justice truly becomes respected." Whitman, touched but humble, replied, "Thank you, Prosecutor Carter. Your example has shown me that true authority lies in justice and respect, not in fear or arrogance." For Whitman, this moment marked the end of a long journey. He had not only recognized his weaknesses, but he had learned to correct and overcome them. The relationship between him and Olivia was now based on mutual respect, and the Newport courthouse shone as a symbol of true justice. The lesson remained clear to everyone: power and arrogance can be destabilized by competence and dignity, but redemption is possible provided one recognizes one's mistakes and changes one's actions. Whitman, standing in his office, gazed at the city through the large windows. For the first time in a long time, he felt that the justice system was in good hands, and that he had finally found his place in a fair and lasting justice system.